Welcome to our deep dive into Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre.
Oh, Jane Eyre. Fantastic.
We're going to
It's a
explore
classic.
the novel structure and key plot points and themes,
One's great.
all without spoiling the reading experience for you.
Right.
Consider this your guide
Yeah.
to navigating the complex world of Jane Eyre, uncovering its hidden depths, and appreciating its brilliance even more.
Okay.
The book unfolds in 5 parts, mirroring Jane's journey from childhood to adulthood.
Mm-hmm.
We'll be looking at Gateshead,
Okay.
the Lowood School, Thornfield Hall, her time with the Rivers family,
Right.
and finally her resolution with Rochester.
Gotcha.
But first, let's step into the world of Gateshead, where we meet young Jane, an orphan living with her unwelcoming aunt, Mrs. Reed, and her cousins.
Okay.
What's striking about this setting right from the start is how Bronte uses it to introduce the theme of social class that looms large throughout the entire novel.
Absolutely. Gateshead is a place of isolation and oppression for Jane, constantly reminding her of her dependence and lower social standing. It's like she begins her life already on the outside looking in.
Yeah.
And this sense of being different, of being less than, really shapes her journey.
And it's in this oppressive environment that we encounter that infamous Red Room incident.
Oh, yeah.
It's not just a spooky scene, is it?
No, not at all.
There's so much more to it than that.
Precisely, the Red Room is brimming with symbolism.
Mm-hmm.
Think about it. Jane is locked in this room as punishment.
Yeah.
The very room where her uncle died.
Right.
Bronte masterfully uses the setting to foreshadow the kind of confinement and oppression Jane will face later in life.
And she believes she sees her uncle's ghost.
Oh, wow.
This incident is so central to understanding how trauma shapes Jane's character and how she reacts to situations later in the book.
It's a testament to Bronte's skill and psychological realism. The Red Room, with its crimson walls and air of confinement, becomes a potent symbol of Jane's powerlessness and the fear those in power like her aunt can inflict.
But even as a child, Jane possesses a strong spirit.
Yeah.
She defies Mrs. Reed, refusing to be completely subdued. What do you make of that?
That's a crucial point. Her defiance reveals her inherent sense of justice and her unwillingness to accept mistreatment even at such a young age.
Yeah.
This characteristic, you'll see, becomes a driving force for Jane throughout the novel. It really sets the stage for who she is as an individual.
So Gateshead is clearly not a nurturing environment for Jane, and from there we move to Lowood Institution,
Sure.
chapters 5 through 10. Now imagine a 19th century boarding school,
Okay.
but harsher, cold, hunger, strict discipline. It's not a place you'd want to send a child.
Bronte wasn't exaggerating. These depictions of charity schools were drawn from real-world experiences. It was a harsh reality for many children.
Here we meet Helen Burns, who I always found to be such a fascinating contrast to Jane. She's this gentle soul who teaches Jane about resilience and acceptance in the face of suffering.
Their contrasting personalities highlight two very different approaches to dealing with hardship.
Yeah.
We have Helen's Christian forbearance, her willingness to accept her fate, versus Jane's burning desire for justice, her constant need to question and challenge the status quo.
It's like they represent two different sides of the human experience when it comes to dealing with difficult situations.
Right.
And let's not forget Mr. Brocklehurst, the hypocritical headmaster.
Mr. Brocklehurst.
Yeah.
He embodies the novel's sharp critique of those who preach morality while exploiting and mistreating the vulnerable he claims to be pious and righteous. Yet his actions towards the girls at Lowood, especially Jane, are cruel and unjust.
He publicly humiliates Jane, calling her a liar, based solely on what Mrs. Reed told him. It's Miss Temple, the kind headmistress who steps in and clears Jane's name, showing her that even in a place as bleak as Lowood, goodness can still exist.
That act of kindness from Miss Temple leaves a lasting impression on Jane. It reinforces her belief in the inherent goodness of some people, despite the harsh realities around her. And then, of course, there's the typhus epidemic and Helen's death. That's a moment that really stays with you, doesn't it?
It's a heartbreaking turning point in the novel. It forces Jane to confront the harsh realities of mortality, the fragility of life. It's another significant step in her emotional and psychological development.
Even though Helen's approach to suffering was different from Jane's, her death makes Jane question her own beliefs and strengthens her resolve to seek a better, more fulfilling life.
By the end of Lowood, we see that Jane has matured and gained an education.
Right.
But there's a sense that she's yearning for something more. Would you agree?
Absolutely. The seeds of ambition and a desire for a life beyond the confines of Lowood have definitely been sown, and this yearning, this desire for something more takes her to Thornfield Hall, But that's a story for the next part of our deep dive.
Well, we'll have to wait for that.
Yeah.
We'll see you in part 2.
Looking forward to it.
You've journeyed with Jane through a difficult childhood at Gateshead and the hardships of Lowood.
Yeah.
And get ready for Thornfield Hall, chapters 11 through 27.
All right.
This is where we meet the enigmatic Mr. Rochester.
Oh, yeah, Mr. Rochester.
And let me tell you, their dynamic is just electric.
It is.
I was absolutely captivated by the intensity of their relationship.
Yeah.
What do you think makes it so compelling?
Well, Thornfield is indeed where things get really interesting. Rochester is
Right.
the quintessential Byronic hero, brooding, passionate, intelligent, and tortured by a dark past. This archetype, so popular in romantic literature,
Yeah.
challenges conventional notions of heroism.
Yeah.
He's not your typical knight in shining armor.
Right.
And that's precisely what makes him so fascinating, particularly in relation to Jane.
Their conversations are full of witty banter and intellectual sparring,
Oh, yeah,
which is such a refreshing change from the stifling atmosphere of Lowood.
definitely.
You can practically feel the tension crackling between them.
Brontë uses their intellectual connection to subvert traditional power dynamics.
Yeah.
Remember, Jane is a governess employed by Rochester.
Right.
But their conversations put them on a more equal footing. They challenge each other, pushing each other to think differently.
It's like their minds are engaged in a constant dance.
Yeah.
And that's before we even factor in the undeniable romantic tension.
Right.
But Brontë doesn't shy away from the darker elements of their relationship either. She masterfully weaves in those classic Gothic elements, the mysterious fire in Rochester's room, the strange laughter echoing through the halls.
These elements create an atmosphere of suspense and foreshadow the secrets that Thornfield holds. Brontë is playing with our expectations here.
Yeah.
She's building a sense of unease, hinting that beneath the surface of this seemingly grand estate, something is amiss.
And then there's Bertha Mason Rochester's wife, imprisoned in the attic.
Oh.
Her presence looms over everything, doesn't it?
Bertha is one of the most controversial and complex characters in literature on the surface. She's depicted as the mad woman in the attic, a figure who embodies everything Victorian society feared in women: uncontrolled emotions, sexuality, and defiance of social norms. But she's so much more than that.
I've always seen her as a victim of circumstance.
Yeah.
She's been silenced, her story told entirely from Rochester's perspective.
Yeah. Exactly. We never hear her side of the story, which raises important questions about power, agency, and who gets to control the narrative.
The revelation of her existence on Jane's wedding day is just devastating.
Oh, it is.
Imagine the shock, the sense of betrayal Jane must have felt.
It's a pivotal moment for Jane. She loves Rochester, but she refuses to be his mistress. This decision speaks volumes about her character. She's not willing to compromise her morals or her sense of self-worth, even for love.
It's such a powerful statement about her strength and independence. She chooses to walk away from a situation that most women in her position would have felt powerless to refuse. It's a testament to her unwavering principles and her refusal to be anyone's possession, and so heartbroken but resolute.
Jane leaves Thornfield, leading us to part 4 of our deep dive, where she encounters the Rivers family, chapters 28 through 35. Now, this is where we see Jane at her most vulnerable. After fleeing Thornfield, she's penniless, homeless, and close to starvation. It's a brutal test of her resilience. Brontë doesn't shy away from depicting the harsh realities faced by a single woman without means in that society. It's a stark reminder of how precarious Jane's existence truly is.
It makes you wonder how many women face similar circumstances,
Yeah.
but didn't have Jane's inner strength to survive. But even in this desperate situation, her spirit doesn't break. She's rescued by the kind-hearted Rivers, siblings, St. John. Diana and Mary, they each represent a different path for Jane, don't they?
They do. Diana and Mary offer her intellectual companionship and a loving family dynamic that she's always craved. They represent a world of intellectual stimulation and genuine affection, something Jane has always longed for.
And then there's St. John, who offers a very different kind of life.
Yeah.
He's so rigid and austere, the complete opposite of Rochester.
St. John represents duty and religious devotion. He proposes a life of missionary work in India, a life of service and self-sacrifice. But there's a coldness to him, a lack of passion that's unsettling.
And just when things are starting to settle down, there's that incredible twist. Jane discovers she's inherited a fortune from her uncle,
Wow.
and that the Rivers are actually her cousins. I remember gasping out loud when I first read that.
It's a game changer. It shifts the power dynamics completely. She's no longer the poor dependent governess. She now has the means to choose her own path, to define her own destiny.
It's fascinating to see how this newfound independence affects her decision-making.
Yeah.
She's no longer driven by the need for survival or security. She can finally make choices based on her own desires and principles. And that leads us to one of the most crucial moments in the novel, her refusal of St. John's proposal. Why do you think she rejects him?
While St. John offers stability and a seemingly noble purpose, Jane recognizes that a marriage without love would be a form of imprisonment. It would stifle her spirit, her need for intellectual and emotional connection, just as much as remaining with Rochester as his mistress.
It's a testament to her unwavering belief in the importance of love and passion. She refuses to settle for a life devoid of those essential elements, even if it means sacrificing financial security and social acceptance. And then, just when she seems to have found peace with her decision, there's that spine-tingling moment when she hears Rochester's voice calling her name across the miles. What do you make of that scene?
It's a brilliantly executed literary device that suggests a profound spiritual connection between them, transcending physical distance. Some might even call it fate. But it also raises questions about the nature of their bond. Is it healthy? Is it sustainable? Or is it based on a kind of obsessive dependency? These are questions that Brontë leaves us to ponder.
It's a scene that's both romantic and unsettling, hinting at the complexities of their relationship and setting the stage for their reunion in Part 5. But before we delve into that final part of our deep dive, I want to circle back to something you said earlier about Bertha Mason. You called her one of the most controversial characters in literature. Can you elaborate on that? Why do you think Brontë chose to portray her the way she did?
Bertha's character has sparked countless debates over the years. Some critics argue that she represents the repressed aspects of Jane herself. The passion, the rage, the desire for freedom that Jane must keep in check to survive in a world that demands female submissiveness. Others see her as a victim of patriarchal structures, a woman stripped of her agency and silenced by a society that deems her inconvenient.
That's a fascinating interpretation. It adds another layer to the idea of Jane choosing to leave Rochester. She's not just rejecting him, she's also rejecting a path that might lead to a similar fate as Bertha's.
Exactly. By choosing independence, Jane is choosing to define herself on her own terms. She's refusing to be confined either physically or emotionally.
So to recap, Jane endures an incredible ordeal in this section, facing poverty, societal judgment, and a marriage proposal that would have crushed her spirit. But through it all, her determination to stay true to herself never wavers. And with that, we reach the final part of our deep dive, the return to Thornfield and the ultimate resolution with Rochester. So we left off with Jane hearing Rochester's voice calling to her, that mysterious connection drawing her back to him. Now she returns to Thornfield, but what she finds is completely transformed. Instead of the grand estate she once knew, it's a desolate ruin. What do you make of this drastic change?
Well, the destruction of Thornfield is symbolic on multiple levels. On a literal level, it represents the end of an era, the burning away of the past, all those secrets and hidden sorrows. But it also mirrors Rochester's own internal state. He's been humbled by tragedy, stripped of his wealth and social standing.
And of course, there's that devastating fire, Bertha's death, and Rochester's injuries. It's like everything has been irrevocably altered.
Yeah, the fire isn't just a random event. It acts as a cleansing force, purging Thornfield of its darkness and paving the way for a new beginning. And for Rochester, his physical impairments, the loss of his sight, his hand, reflect his emotional and spiritual transformation. He's no longer the proud, domineering figure we first met.
He's been brought low force to confront his past mistakes and the consequences of his actions. It's in this vulnerable state that Jane finds him at Ferndean Manor, a stark contrast to the vibrant Thornfield we first encountered. What do you think Brontë is trying to convey with this shift in setting?
Well, Ferndean, with its darkness and isolation, mirrors Rochester's internal state. He's consumed by guilt and regret, cut off from the world he once knew. It's a place of introspection and healing, a place where he can finally confront his demons.
And Jane's arrival brings a glimmer of hope back into his life. Their reunion is one of the most emotionally charged scenes in the novel.
Yeah, it's a testament to the enduring power of their connection. Despite everything they've been through, their love for each other remains. But this time the dynamic is different. Jane is no longer the vulnerable governess seeking a place in the world.
She has her inheritance, she's found her family, and most importantly, she's come to terms with her own worth.
Right.
She meets Rochester as an equal, offering him not just love, but also forgiveness and understanding.
Their marriage in this final section is built on a foundation of mutual respect and equality. It's a far cry from their first attempt at marriage, which was shrouded in secrets and deception.
And there's that beautiful detail of Rochester regaining some of his sight, just in time to see their first child.
Oh, wow.
It's like a physical manifestation of his redemption, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. It symbolizes renewal, the possibility of happiness after enduring unimaginable hardship. It's a reminder that even after great loss and suffering, there can be healing and new beginnings.
The novel ends with that iconic line, "Reader, I married him." What do you think is the lasting impact of those words?
Well, they signify Jane's ultimate triumph. Throughout the novel, she's faced societal pressures, moral dilemmas, and the allure of both passion and security. But in the end, she chooses a path that honors her heart and her principles. She marries Rochester not out of dependence or desperation, but because she loves him, she sees his true character, and their relationship has evolved into one of equals.
By declaring, "Reader, I married him," she's taking ownership of her choices and her happiness. It's a powerful statement of self-determination.
It's as if she's inviting us, the readers, to celebrate her victory with her.
Mhm.
She's overcoming incredible obstacles to arrive at this place of fulfillment.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Jane Eyre, what are the key takeaways you hope our listener will hold on to?
Well, Jane's journey reminds us that true happiness comes from staying true to ourselves, fighting for what we believe in, and never giving up on the pursuit of a meaningful life. It's a story that challenges us to examine our own beliefs about love, social justice, and what it truly means to be free.
Jane Eyre is a novel that stays with you long after you've finished reading it. It provokes thought, sparks debate, and offers endless opportunities for interpretation.
And while we've covered a lot of ground today, remember, there's always more to discover in Jane Eyre. Every reading reveals new layers of meaning, new insights into the human condition.
Here's a final thought for you to consider. We've talked about how the power dynamics shift between Jane and Rochester. But what about the power Jane gains through storytelling itself? By narrating her own experiences, she controls her own narrative, ensuring that her voice is heard. It's a subtle yet powerful form of agency.
It's a brilliant observation. Jane's act of writing, of claiming her own story, is perhaps the ultimate act of defiance and self-empowerment.
So as you embark on your own reading of Jane Eyre, remember to pay attention to not just the plot, but to the way Jane's voice shapes our understanding of her world. Trust me, it's a journey worth taking. Until next time, happy reading.